Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who believes the truth always finds its way back. Tonight's story is about a hidden secret, a painful mistake, and a man who spent years living with regret. Let's begin. Sometimes the people who ruin your life leave behind nothing but a name. I didn't understand what that meant until the day I found the box. The old house had always sounded different when the wind came in from the bay. Every floorboard groaned. Every door rattled. Every corner seemed to remember something the people living there had forgotten. I was 29 years old, and after nearly 2 decades in that weathered coastal house, I thought I knew every inch of it. I was wrong. It started on a Saturday morning, while I was helping my aunt clean out the storage room. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The smell of dust and old wood hung in the air. We were sorting through boxes nobody had opened in years when I noticed one floorboard near the back wall sitting slightly higher than the others. At first I thought it was water damage. Then curiosity got the better of me. I knelt down and pressed my fingers against the edge. The board shifted. My heartbeat slowed. Then quickened. There was something underneath. "Tessa?" My aunt called from the hallway. "You okay in there?" "Yeah," I answered. "Just found something strange." I lifted the board carefully. A small hidden compartment sat beneath it. Inside was a faded wooden box covered in dust. My pulse hammered as I pulled it free. The hinges creaked when I opened it. There were only 3 items inside. A burned photograph, a silver pocket watch with a crack running through the glass, and a folded note yellowed with age. I unfolded the paper slowly. The handwriting hit me first. My father's. I hadn't seen it in years. My throat tightened. Then I read the words. "Never trust Voss." That was it. No explanation. No date. No signature. Just 4 words. Never trust Voss. I stared at the note while questions crowded my mind. Who was Voss? Why had my father hidden this? Why keep it beneath the floorboards instead of throwing it away? My parents had died when I was 10. Most of my memories were fragments now. A laugh. A voice. A scent. Pieces of people I could never get back. But suddenly it felt like they had left me a message. A warning. That night I couldn't sleep. The rain continued long after midnight. I sat at the kitchen table turning the cracked pocket watch over in my hands. The watch had stopped at exactly 8:17. The photograph was worse. Most of it had been damaged, but one corner survived. A man stood partially visible near the edge of the frame. His face was missing. Only his expensive coat remained. The next morning I carried the box to the community library where I worked. It was quiet there. Safe. Predictable. I spent hours helping visitors, shelving books, answering questions. Eventually the mystery faded into the background. At least until the front door opened shortly before closing time. I looked up automatically. A man stepped inside. Tall. Dark coat. Calm eyes. The kind of presence that made people notice without knowing why. He walked directly toward the history section. And for reasons I couldn't explain, the moment I saw him, a chill ran through me. Because for the first time in years, I looked at a stranger and felt as if the past had just walked through the door. There are moments when a stranger looks familiar before you even know their name. I watched the man move through the library as if he belonged there. Not because he carried himself like a regular visitor. Quite the opposite. Everything about him felt out of place. The expensive coat. The polished shoes. The quiet confidence that seemed to follow him like a shadow. Yet somehow he looked more comfortable among dusty books than most people who came through those doors. I told myself I was being ridiculous. People walked into the library every day. There was no reason this one should matter. Still, I found myself glancing up every few minutes. He spent nearly an hour in the local history section before selecting a single book and settling into the chair beside the large front window. The late afternoon sun spilled across the pages. He barely moved. When closing time arrived, I approached his table carrying a stack of returned novels. "Sorry," I said. Softly. "We are closing." He looked up. For a second I forgot what I was about to say. His eyes were calm. Observant. The kind of eyes that notice details other people missed. "Of course," he replied. His voice was low and steady. I lost track of time. I smiled politely. That usually means we are doing our job right. Something almost like amusement touched his face. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. He checked out the book and left. That should have been the end of it. Instead, he came back the next day. And the day after that. Then again the following week. Always around the same time. Always choosing the same chair. Always reading. First we barely spoke. A greeting. A comment about the weather. Nothing important. Yet somehow I started noticing the small things. The way he carefully returned books to the cart instead of leaving them scattered on tables. The way he remembered every volunteer's name. The way elderly visitors seemed instantly comfortable around him. It made no sense. Men like him usually did not spend their afternoons in small-town libraries. One rainy evening my Aunt May stopped by after work. She spotted him immediately. "Who is that?" she whispered. I looked over. He was standing near the maritime history shelves. Just a regular visitor. That is not what I asked. I laughed despite myself. I have no idea. "Well," she said, studying him. "He looks like trouble." I rolled my eyes. "You say that about everyone." "Not everyone." Her gaze lingered a moment longer before she changed the subject. Later that night, after everyone had left, I locked the front doors and began shutting down the computers. As I walked past the history section, I noticed something sitting on one of the tables. A book. The one he had been reading all week. I picked it up to reshelve it. A folded piece of paper slipped from between the pages. I frowned and opened it. It was not a note. It was a photocopy of an old newspaper article. The headline was partially cut off, but one name remained perfectly visible. Rowan. My last name. My breath caught. Beneath the headline was a grainy photograph taken nearly 15 years earlier. And standing in the background was a man wearing the exact same silver pocket watch that now sat hidden inside the box beneath my bed. The past does not knock before it enters your life. It simply appears one day and sits down beside you. I stared at the newspaper clipping long after the library had emptied. The building felt different now. Smaller somehow. Quieter. The sound of the rain outside seemed distant compared to the pounding of my own heartbeat. Rowan. My family name. Printed in faded ink beneath a headline someone had deliberately cut apart. I looked again at the photograph. The image was grainy, the faces impossible to identify, but the silver pocket watch was unmistakable. The crack across the glass matched perfectly. I slipped the article into my bag and drove home through streets slick with rain. The entire way, questions chased each other through my mind. Why was the clipping hidden inside a book? Why had it been left behind? And why did it feel less like an accident and more like a message? The next morning I pulled the old box from beneath my bed again. The pocket watch felt heavier than before. I turned it over in my hands, tracing the worn metal edges. There was an inscription on the back I had never noticed. The letters were faint, nearly erased by time. To Daniel. Keep moving forward. My father's name. A knot formed in my throat. I had spent years trying to hold on to memories of him. Yet now it felt as if he were reaching backward through time, trying to tell me something I was only beginning to understand. By noon I was back at the library. The article sat folded inside my desk drawer. I told myself I would ignore it, focus on work, help visitors, return books, live my normal life. Then the front door opened. He walked in carrying a paper coffee cup. My stomach tightened instantly. Callum Voss glanced toward the circulation desk and nodded. "Good morning." "Morning," I replied, hoping my voice sounded normal. It did not. His eyes lingered for half a second, just enough to notice. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Long night." The lie came easily. He studied me for a moment before accepting the answer. Those are usually the dangerous ones. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. Not threatening. Just knowing. As if he understood exactly what it meant to lose sleep over the past. Throughout the afternoon I caught myself watching him. Not because I wanted to. Because I could not stop. Every time I looked up he seemed completely absorbed in a book. Calm. Patient. Ordinary. Yet the name Voss echoed through my thoughts like a warning bell. Near closing time an elderly man approached the desk asking for help finding a local genealogy record. Before I could stand, Callum was already helping him navigate the archive shelves. The interaction lasted less than 5 minutes. Still, the old man left smiling. "Nice fellow," he told me on his way out. "People like that are rare these days." I looked across the room. Callum was returning a book to its place. For a moment our eyes met. Then his gaze shifted downward, directly toward the folded newspaper article sitting beside my hand. The color drained from his face so quickly I almost missed it. Almost. He recovered immediately. Too immediately. And that was when I knew. Whatever connected my family to the name Voss, Callum had just recognized it too. Some secrets reveal themselves slowly. Others announce their presence with a single look. I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending nothing had happened. Pretending I had not seen the reaction flash across Callum's face when his eyes landed on the newspaper clipping. Pretending my pulse was not racing every time I glanced toward the history section. Neither of us mentioned it. Not that day. Not the next one either. Yet something had changed. I could feel it. The space between us no longer felt casual. It felt occupied by questions neither of us wanted to ask. A week later, the town's annual summer festival arrived. It was the biggest event of the year. Families filled the waterfront. Children ran between booths carrying cotton candy. Local bands played beside the marina. Strings of warm lights stretched across the streets as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Normally I loved festival week. This year my attention kept drifting elsewhere. I spotted Callum near one of the food stands just after sunset. He looked strangely normal standing among families and tourists. No expensive coat this time. Just a dark sweater with the sleeves pushed back. For a moment it was easy to forget the uneasiness that followed him. Easy to forget the note hidden beneath my floorboards. "You came," I said when I reached him. He smiled faintly. "You sound surprised." Most visitors disappear after a few days. Maybe I am not most visitors. The answer should have sounded arrogant. Somehow it did not. We spent the evening walking through the festival together, talking about books, childhood memories, places we wanted to visit. The conversation felt effortless. That bothered me more than it should have. Every instinct told me to keep my distance. Yet every time I tried, something pulled me back. Near the pier, a volunteer handed us paper wristbands decorated with tiny lighthouse symbols. Mine was blue. His was green. "Proof you survived another festival," the volunteer joked. Callum studied the band for a moment before slipping it onto his wrist. "I think I will keep it." I laughed. "Why?" "Because some moments deserve to be remembered." The answer lingered with me long after he said it. Later we stopped near the water. The ocean reflected hundreds of festival lights. Waves rolled gently against the docks. For the first time all evening neither of us spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Then his gaze shifted toward the silver chain around my neck. The pocket watch. I had started carrying it after discovering the hidden box. Callum's expression changed instantly. The warmth disappeared. Not completely. Just enough for me to notice. "That watch," he said quietly. "Where did you get it?" My heartbeat stumbled. "It belonged to my father." He stared at it for several seconds. Far too long. "Are you okay?" I asked. "You look like you have seen a ghost." He looked away toward the water. "Maybe I have." Before I could ask what that meant, fireworks exploded overhead. Bright colors filled the sky. People cheered around us. But Callum never looked up. He remained perfectly still, watching the pocket watch in my hand as though it had just confirmed something he had spent years trying not to believe. And for the first time since meeting him, I became certain of one thing. He knew exactly who my family was. The hardest truths are the ones people almost confess. After the festival, I could not stop thinking about the look on Callum's face. It had lasted only a few seconds, but it changed everything. People do not react that way to an old pocket watch unless it means something. Or someone. The following morning the town woke beneath a blanket of fog rolling in from the ocean. The harbor disappeared behind a wall of white. Fishing boats became shadows. Storefronts looked distant and unreal. I arrived at the library early, hoping work would distract me. It did not. Every book I shelved reminded me of unanswered questions. Every quiet moment gave my thoughts room to wander. Around 10 o'clock, Callum walked through the front door. My stomach tightened immediately. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. as if he had spent the entire night arguing with memories. He carried a cardboard tray with 2 coffees. Without a word, he placed one beside me. "You look like you could use this," he said. I stared at the cup. "How do you know how I take my coffee?" For the first time since I met him, he smiled fully. "You order the same thing every morning from Harbor Bean. Medium roast. 1 cream. No sugar." That sounds slightly alarming. I spend a lot of time observing people. That sounds even more alarming. His laugh surprised me. It was warm, genuine. For a moment the tension disappeared. Then I remembered the festival, the watch, the expression that had crossed his face. "Callum," I said quietly, "have we met before?" His smile faded. No, the answer came too quickly. "Are you sure?" His eyes held mine. "Why would you ask that?" I hesitated, because I did not know how much he already knew. Because every instinct warned me not to reveal the note hidden beneath my floorboards. "You looked familiar," I lied. He studied me carefully, then nodded once. Sometimes people remind us of someone else. The conversation ended there, but the uneasiness remained. That afternoon after he left, I decided to visit the local records office. The building sat 3 blocks from the courthouse. Most people forgot it existed. Dusty archives filled narrow aisles. Old property records lined metal shelves. Newspapers stretched back decades. I spent nearly 3 hours searching. Most of it led nowhere. Then I found a file. Rowan Family Holdings. My pulse quickened. The folder contained articles, legal notices, and business documents from 15 years earlier. Several pages were missing. Others had been removed entirely. Someone had gone through the file long before I arrived. Yet one document remained. A photograph attached to a business report. My father stood beside 3 men in suits. I recognized none of them, except one. The image was younger, the hair shorter, the face harder. But there was no mistake. Callum Voss stood beside my father in that photograph. And judging by the date printed beneath it, they had known each other years before my family lost everything. Some discoveries do not answer questions. They create better ones. I sat alone in my car outside the records office staring at the photograph until the edges blurred. My father stood there smiling beside 3 men. One was Callum, 15 years younger, 15 years closer to whatever had happened. The image should have made things clearer. Instead, it shattered everything I thought I knew. If my father had known Callum, why had he left behind a note warning me never to trust him? Why had nobody ever mentioned his name? Why had my Aunt May spent years avoiding every conversation about the months before my parents lost their business? The drive home felt longer than usual. The ocean stretched beside the highway, gray beneath a cloudy sky. Waves rolled against the rocks in a steady rhythm that usually calmed me. Not today. By the time I reached the house, I had made a decision. I was done guessing. If Callum knew something, I was going to find out. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The next afternoon I found him exactly where he always sat, beside the library window with a history book open in front of him. Sunlight spilled across the pages. Everything looked normal. That almost made me angry. I walked directly to his table. "We need to talk." His eyes lifted from the book. He studied my face for a second and immediately closed it. "That sounds serious." "It is." The library was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. I slid the photograph across the table. For the first time since I had met him, Callum looked genuinely shaken. His hand froze halfway toward the picture. The color drained from his face. Not dramatically, just enough to tell me everything. "Where did you find this?" he asked quietly. "So you do recognize it." He leaned back in his chair. His jaw tightened. "Tessa, do not." My voice came out sharper than intended. "Do not look at me like I am fragile. Tell me the truth." The silence stretched between us, long enough for my heartbeat to become the loudest thing in the room. Finally, he picked up the photograph. His thumb brushed across the faded image of my father. Something changed in his expression. Regret. Real regret. "Your father was a good man," he said. The answer hit me harder than I expected. "You knew him." It was not a question. Callum looked down at the photograph again. "Yes." The single word seemed to steal the air from the room. Every suspicion I had carried for weeks suddenly became real. How? I whispered. He closed his eyes briefly before speaking. A long time ago, before everything fell apart, our families worked together. Families. The word echoed through my mind. Then why did he leave me a warning about you? That question landed like a stone between us. Callum's gaze lifted slowly to mine. For a moment he looked exhausted. Not tired. Burdened. Like someone carrying a weight that had grown heavier every year. Because he thought I betrayed him, he said softly. My pulse stumbled. Did you? Another silence. Longer this time. More dangerous. Outside, a seagull cried somewhere beyond the windows. Inside, the entire world seemed to narrow to the space between us. Then Callum spoke 5 words I would not forget for the rest of my life. I believed the wrong person. There are answers that bring relief. And then there are answers that leave you awake at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling. I did not sleep that night. The words kept replaying inside my head. I believed the wrong person. Such a simple sentence. Such an incomplete one. It explained nothing and everything at the same time. Rain tapped softly against my bedroom window, while the silver pocket watch rested on the nightstand beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father in that photograph. Smiling beside Callum. Standing close enough to suggest trust. Close enough to suggest friendship. Somewhere between that photograph and the note hidden beneath the floorboards, everything had fallen apart. I just did not know how. The next few days felt different. Callum still came to the library, but something had shifted between us. The easy conversations disappeared. The comfortable silences became heavier. We both seemed aware of the invisible line neither of us knew how to cross. One afternoon I found him standing alone near the Maritime Archives. He was staring out the window toward the harbor. Fishing boats drifted across the water beneath a pale gray sky. For several seconds I simply watched him. There was something lonely about him in that moment. Something unexpectedly human. You could have told me, I said. He did not turn around. I know. You knew who I was from the beginning. His shoulders tightened slightly. Not from the beginning. When then? Finally he looked at me. The night I saw the pocket watch. The honesty surprised me. And after that? His gaze drifted toward the shelves. After that, I should have left. The answer caught me off guard. Why? For a second he seemed to consider several different responses. Then he chose the simplest one. Because it would have been easier. Easier. The word lingered between us. Easier for whom? Easier for him. Easier for me. Easier for whatever truth he still refused to explain. You keep talking like you owe me something, I said quietly. Maybe I do. The admission landed harder than I expected. Before I could respond, the library door opened. A group of schoolchildren rushed inside for an afternoon reading program. The moment disappeared. Callum stepped back. The distance returned. Later that evening, I walked home along the waterfront. The air smelled like salt and approaching rain. Lights flickered inside. Small shops lining Main Street. Everything looked ordinary. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. When I reached my house, Aunt May was sitting on the porch swing waiting for me. The sight immediately made me nervous. What is wrong? I asked. She patted the empty seat beside her. Sit down. Her expression told me this conversation had been waiting a long time. Iset. The porch creaked softly beneath us. For several moments she said nothing. Then she looked toward the ocean. I knew this day would come eventually. My stomach tightened. What day? Her eyes found mine. Tired eyes. Sad eyes. The eyes of someone carrying a secret for years. The day you started asking questions about your father. The evening air suddenly felt colder. May, I whispered. What are you not telling me? She drew a slow breath. Then she spoke the name I had been hearing everywhere lately. Callum Voss was not the man your father feared. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It comes in pieces, forcing you to rebuild your entire understanding of the past one fragment at a time. I stared at Aunt May waiting for her to explain. The porch swing creaked softly beneath us. Somewhere in the distance, a foghorn echoed across the bay. Then who was? I asked. May folded her hands together. For a moment she looked older than I had ever seen her. A man named Everett Hale. The name meant nothing to me. Who was he? Her expression darkened. Someone your father trusted. My chest tightened. Trust. That word seemed to sit at the center of every mystery surrounding my family. What happened? May looked toward the ocean before answering. Your father and Everett built a company together. Callum worked with them when he was younger. They all believed they were building something that would last. Then why did everything fall apart? She sighed. Because somebody started lying. The answer felt frustratingly incomplete. Before I could press further, May placed a hand over mine. Tessa, your father never hated Callum. He blamed him. There is a difference. Those words followed me for days. I heard them while shelving books, while making coffee, while walking home beneath the evening sky. Your father never hated Callum. I kept trying to convince myself that it should not matter. Yet somehow it did. More than I wanted to admit. A week later, the library hosted a community fundraiser. Local artists displayed their work. Families wandered through the aisles. The building buzzed with conversation and laughter. I spent most of the evening helping visitors. Around 7 o'clock, I noticed Callum standing near a display of historical photographs. He looked as if he almost turned around and left several times before finally staying. I walked over before I could change my mind. You came. He smiled faintly. I was not sure I should. Neither was I. The honesty surprised both of us. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he glanced toward one of the old photographs hanging on the wall. It showed the harbor 15 years earlier. This town remembers everything, he said quietly. That sounds like experience talking. His smile faded. Maybe it is. We spent the next hour together moving through the exhibits. Nothing dramatic happened. No revelations. No confessions. Just conversation. Easy conversation. The kind that sneaks past your defenses when you are not paying attention. At one point we stepped outside onto the library patio overlooking the water. The evening air carried the scent of salt and summer. Lights from fishing boats shimmered across the bay. For a long moment we stood side by side without speaking. Then Callum looked at me. Really looked at me. You should know something, he said. My heartbeat quickened. What? His gaze drifted toward the horizon. Meeting you was never part of the plan. I frowned. What plan? A sad smile touched his face. Exactly. The answer made no sense. Yet somehow it felt important. As if he had almost said something he could not take back. Then his phone vibrated. The moment shattered instantly. He checked the screen and all the warmth disappeared from his expression. I had never seen a face change so quickly. Is everything okay? I asked. Callum slipped the phone back into his pocket. No, the single word landed heavily between us. Before I could ask another question, he looked toward the parking lot. A black sedan had just pulled up beside the curb. And standing next to it was a man I had never seen before. Watching us with the kind of attention that made my stomach drop. The people who change your life are not always the ones who walk toward you. Sometimes they are the ones who have been watching from a distance all along. The man beside the black sedan looked to be in his early 50s. Gray hair. Dark jacket. Calm posture. Nothing about him seemed threatening. Yet the moment Callum saw him, every trace of warmth vanished from his face. Who is that? I asked quietly. Callum did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the stranger. Someone who should not be here. The response did nothing to ease the knot forming in my stomach. The man glanced toward us once more before opening the rear door of the sedan and disappearing inside. Seconds later the vehicle pulled away from the curb and vanished down the street. Only then did Callum release a breath. You know him. It was not a question. He rubbed a hand across his jaw. I know of him. That sounds like a very careful answer. His gaze shifted toward me. Regret flickered there again. The same regret I had begun noticing more and more often. Tessa, there are things I am still trying to understand myself. About my family? His silence answered before he did. That night I could not stop thinking about the stranger. Or about the look on Callum's face. Around midnight I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by documents, photographs, and notes collected over the past several weeks. The old newspaper clipping lay beside the pocket watch. The photograph from the records office rested nearby. Every clue seemed connected. I just could not see how. My phone buzzed suddenly. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. For a moment I considered ignoring it. Instead I answered. Hello. Tessa Rowan? The voice belonged to a man. Older. Professional. Who is this? My name is Nolan Briggs. The name sounded vaguely familiar. I am an investigative journalist. My pulse quickened. Why are you calling me? A pause followed. Because I have spent the last 8 months researching what happened to your family. Every muscle in my body went still. What? I whispered. I believe important information was hidden 15 years ago. Information involving your father, Everett Hale, and several business partners. Everett. The name immediately dragged me upright in my chair. How do you know about Everett Hale? The same way I know about Callum Voss. My heart slammed against my ribs. The room suddenly felt too small. What exactly are you saying? Papers rustled on the other end of the line. I am saying your family's story was never fully told. I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part desperately needed answers. Do you have proof? I have enough evidence to know somebody spent years making sure certain records disappeared. His voice lowered. And I believe someone is trying to prevent the truth from coming out even now. A chill crawled down my spine. Outside, wind rattled the kitchen window. Why contact me? I asked. Because your name keeps appearing everywhere I look. Silence settled between us. Then Nolan spoke again. There is one more thing. My grip tightened around the phone. What? Tomorrow morning I am publishing an article. My breath caught. About what? Another pause. Longer this time. He sounded almost reluctant when he answered. About the man standing beside your father in that photograph 15 years ago. Some mornings change your life before you even get out of bed. I was awake before sunrise. Not because I wanted to be. Because sleep had become impossible. Nolan Briggs's phone call echoed through my mind all night. By 6:30, I was sitting at my kitchen table staring at my laptop. The sky outside was still gray. Rain drifted across the harbor in thin sheets. My coffee had gone cold 20 minutes earlier. I barely noticed. Then the article appeared. The headline hit me like a physical blow. I read it once. Then twice. Then a third time because part of me refused to believe it. Nolan had uncovered documents linking a failed business investigation from 15 years earlier to several missing financial records. My father's name appeared repeatedly. So did Everett Hale's. And then I saw the name I had been dreading. Callum Voss. My pulse thundered in my ears as I scrolled. According to the article, an internal report had accused my father of financial misconduct. The report had triggered a chain of events that destroyed partnerships, investments, and reputations. Families lost businesses. Careers collapsed. Communities turned their backs on people they had trusted. At the center of it all stood one signature. Callum Voss. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. The article never accused him of creating the report. It never claimed he acted alone. But the evidence suggested he had approved it, supported it, helped make it real. My hands trembled. I closed the laptop, opened it again, read everything a second time. Nothing changed. Around noon, the library felt suffocating. Every shelf, every book, every quiet corner reminded me of him. I kept expecting the front door to open, kept expecting to see him walk in carrying a coffee and pretending everything was normal. At 2:15 he appeared. My stomach dropped instantly. He knew. One look at his face told me he had already read the article. The entire library seemed to disappear around us. He approached the circulation desk slowly. Tessa. Just hearing my name in his voice hurt more than it should have. Is it true? I asked. No greeting. No small talk. No pretending. His expression tightened. You read it. Answer me. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds. Felt like hours. Finally he nodded once. Part of it. The admission shattered something inside me. Part of it. My voice cracked. My family lost everything. Regret filled his eyes immediately. Real regret. The kind that comes from carrying something for years. I know. No, I stepped back. You do not get to say that. Several visitors looked up from nearby tables. Neither of us noticed. You knew who I was, I continued. You knew from the moment you saw that watch. Tessa. And you still stayed. The pain on his face only made me angrier, because part of me wanted him to deny it. Wanted him to tell me the article was wrong. Wanted him to tell me none of it had happened. Instead, he looked at me with the same sadness I had seen, growing for weeks. Then he said the one thing I never expected. I stayed because leaving became impossible. My heart broke a little when he said it, and that terrified me almost as much as the truth itself. The worst part about betrayal is not the anger. It is realizing that your heart does not immediately stop caring. I left the library before Callum could say another word. The bell above the door rang behind me. I never looked back. The afternoon air felt colder than it should have. Clouds gathered over the harbor. The water beyond the docks churned beneath a rising wind. By the time I reached home, my emotions had become impossible to separate. Anger, grief, confusion, all tangled together. Aunt May found me sitting at the kitchen table hours later with the article spread open in front of me. She read my face before I said a single word. You saw it. I nodded. Most of it was true. The admission hurt. Then why did nobody tell me? My voice cracked despite my efforts. Why spend 15 years hiding everything? May lowered herself into the chair across from me. Because you were a child. I am not a child anymore. I know. Her eyes softened. That is exactly why the truth is finally finding you. The words should have comforted me. Instead they made me feel exhausted. That night I took the pocket watch and the old note to my bedroom. I placed them side by side beneath the lamp. Never trust Voss. For years those 4 words had slept beneath the floorboards waiting for me to find them. Now they felt heavier than ever. Yet something kept bothering me. If my father truly believed Callum had intentionally ruined him, why keep the watch? Why keep the photograph? Why leave behind clues instead of clear answers? The next morning I woke to dozens of missed calls and messages. Most came from people reacting to Nolan Briggs's article. Some expressed sympathy. Others offered theories. A few simply wanted gossip. I ignored them all. Around noon, a knock sounded at the front door. I already knew who it was. Somehow I knew before I opened it. Callum stood on the porch. Wind tugged at his jacket. His eyes looked tired. Please leave. The words came out immediately. He nodded once. If that is what you want. It is. The lie tasted bitter. He seemed to hear it anyway. For several seconds neither of us moved. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed a thick envelope on the porch railing. What is that? Something your father never got the chance to see. My heartbeat quickened. What does that mean? Pain flickered across his face. Real pain. It means I spent 15 years wishing I could change what happened. The sincerity in his voice only made everything worse. Stop. I shook my head. Stop acting like this is about regret. It is about regret. No tears burned behind my eyes. It is about consequences. He accepted the words without argument. That somehow hurt even more. Finally he stepped backward toward the driveway. Read the documents, he said quietly. Then decide what you think of me. I watched him leave. The envelope remained on the railing long after his car disappeared. For nearly an hour I could not bring myself to touch it. But eventually curiosity defeated anger. I carried it inside and opened it. The first page contained a letter dated 15 years earlier. The signature at the bottom made my blood run cold. Everetale. Some letters do not change the past. They change the person you become after reading them. My hand shook as I unfolded the first page. The paper had yellowed with age. The date at the top placed it 15 years in the past, only weeks before everything in my family's life began unraveling. I read the first paragraph once, then again, then a third time because my mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Everett Hale had written directly to Callum, not as a business partner, not as a colleague, as someone issuing instructions. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I continued reading. The letter described concerns about my father's business decisions. Concerns that sounded convincing on the surface. Financial risks. Missing documentation. Allegations of dishonesty. But attached to the letter were additional documents. Documents Everett had never expected anyone to find. Internal memos. Private correspondence. Handwritten notes. Piece by piece a different story emerged. Everett had been manipulating information for months. Altering reports. Redirecting blame. Creating the appearance of problems that never actually existed. My father had spent years building something honest. Everett had quietly positioned himself to inherit everything when trust finally collapsed. I sat frozen at the kitchen table long after finishing the last page. Rain tapped against the windows. The clock above the stove ticked steadily. The world continued moving while mine stood completely still. Callum had not created the lie. He had believed it. The realization hurt in a completely different way. Because it did not erase what happened. It did not erase the consequences. But it changed the shape of the story I had carried my entire life. Suddenly my father's note made more sense. Never trust Voss. Not because Callum had been evil. Because he had been wrong. And when powerful people are wrong, ordinary families pay the price. By evening I had read every document twice. Then my phone rang. Nolan Briggs. You found it, did not you? He asked the moment I answered. How do you know about the letter? Silence followed briefly. Because I have been looking for it for 8 months. I closed my eyes. It proves Everett manipulated everything. It proves more than that. Papers shuffled on his end of the call. Tessa, I found additional records this afternoon. My stomach tightened. What records? Evidence that Everett continued covering his tracks for years after the investigation. The room suddenly felt colder. Why? Because if the truth came out, he would lose everything. I looked toward the envelope still lying open on the table. For the first time, another memory surfaced. The man beside the black sedan. The stranger who had watched Callum and me outside the library. Nolan, I said slowly, do you know what Everett Hale looks like? The journalist paused. Why? I grabbed a pen and quickly sketched the features I remembered. Gray hair. Sharp eyes. Controlled expression. When I finished describing him, Nolan's response came immediately. That is him. My pulse stopped. You are sure? Absolutely. I stared through the rain-streaked window. Toward the darkening harbor. Everett Hale had not disappeared into the past. He was here. In this town. Watching. Listening. Waiting. And for the first time I understood why Callum had looked so shaken the night he saw that black sedan. Because the man responsible for destroying everything had just stepped back into both of our lives. Forgiveness is not something that happens in a moment. It is something you choose when the anger finally grows tired of carrying itself. 3 days after reading Everett Hale's letter, I stood in the cemetery overlooking the ocean. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Sunlight spilled across the grass. The wind moved gently through the rows of white headstones. In my hands rested the silver pocket watch that had started everything. The cracked glass caught the morning light. My parents' graves sat side by side beneath a weathered oak tree. I had visited countless times before. Yet this visit felt different. For years I believed I understood the story of what happened to them. I believed I knew who deserved blame. I believed I knew who deserved my anger. The truth had taken all those certainties away. I knelt beside the graves and placed the watch between them. I know more now, I whispered. The ocean answered with distant waves rolling against the shore. Not everything, but more. My voice trembled slightly. And I think you would have wanted that. Footsteps sounded behind me. Slow. Familiar. I did not need to turn around. I knew who it was. Callum stopped several feet away. Far enough to respect the distance. Close enough to be honest. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The silence felt earned. Finally I stood and faced him. He looked different than the man who first walked into the library months earlier. Not older. Just lighter somehow. As if carrying the truth had become easier than carrying the secret. Nolan published the rest of the story, I said. He nodded. I saw it. The investigation had spread quickly. Everett Hale's deception was no longer hidden. Records had surfaced. Witnesses had spoken. The missing pieces finally fit together. My father had been betrayed by someone he trusted. Callum had believed the lie. And everyone had paid a price for it. You were wrong, I said quietly. Pain crossed his face. I know. A lot of people suffered because of it. I know that too. He never defended himself. Never asked for sympathy. Never tried to reduce what happened. That mattered more than I expected. The wind lifted a few strands of my hair. Somewhere overhead, seagulls drifted across the blue sky. For a moment I thought about the note hidden beneath the floorboards. Never trust Voss. Maybe my father had written it in anger. Maybe in disappointment. Maybe as a warning from a man who had lost faith in someone he once respected. But people are not frozen in their worst mistakes. At least not always. I spent weeks trying to decide what to do with all of this, I admitted. Callum looked down briefly. And I glanced toward my parents' graves one last time. Then back at him. I realized something. His eyes met mine. Waiting. The man who hurt my family is not standing here. Emotion flickered across his face. Real emotion. The kind he usually kept hidden. Tessa? I shook my head gently. That does not mean the past disappears. I know. And it does not mean I forget. His voice was barely above a whisper. I would never ask you to. For the first time in a long time my chest felt lighter. Not because the past had changed. Because I finally understood it. The wind carried the scent of salt water across the cemetery. I looked out toward the ocean and smiled faintly. Some stories end with revenge. Ours ended with the truth. And sometimes that is the only justice life can offer. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need this message today. Tell us in the comments. Can a person truly be forgiven for a mistake that changed someone else's life?